record on this. There, that sounds fancy, doesn't it? And we will go ahead and get started with today's McHenry Area Chamber Lunch and Learn, brought to us by Alden Terrace, the chamber member, and Alden Network. And thank you so much, Ben and Deborah, for doing this and hosting this for us. And we're looking forward to it. Deborah or Ben, would you like to introduce Deborah? Or how would you like to do that? We want to know all about you, Alden Terrace, and then we can get rolling here.
That sounds good. So, good morning. My name is Ben Bordeaux. I am the marketing liaison for Alden Terrace. For those of you who don't know who we are a short and long-term rehabilitation facility. We're at McHenry West High School, a couple of miles away from Northwestern McHenry Hospital. We are of not only short-term rehab for Medicare private insurance patients, but we also do take folks who have Medicaid, who may not even have insurance. We're able to work with them and our financial counselors to get them what family does need, in fact. We also provide benefit for folks taking care of their loved ones at home, as we're probably going to learn a little bit about today with Deb. And you know, Alden, we're the professionals. You know, we're our careers, our jobs, to make sure that you're safe. But we understand in this day and age, it is scary letting mom and grandma go to one of our facilities. It's scary for them to go to the hospital. Folks are now taking care of their family members at home. They're having to change schedules. They're having to rearrange their home and create different facilities there. So what we've done today is we brought in Deb Hallisey. Deb is not only a caregiver, but she is a present caregiver. She's taking care of her mom right now. She did take care of her father for a time. And through being a caregiver, she has now found her own advocate for mom. Also, the author of a book called Your Caregiver Relationship Contract, which I'm sure speaks a little to the caregiving today. So without further ado, we'll introduce Deb Hallisey. Thanks so much for joining us, Deb.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for asking me to come on and talk to the chamber and to your folks at Alden. I am, indulge me please, I'm going to stop my video because I want to make sure that my voice and connection is really clear. I don't want anything to compete with that. So I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to share my screen for the presentation. And I will say that if you have questions, don't feel that you need to leave them until the end. You are welcome to put a question in the chat box or raise a hand, and I will trust that Pete will let me know. So the topic I'm going to be talking about today is the caregiving years. It's actually a journey, and you know that if you're a caregiver. What you may not realize is there really is 6 different stages to being a caregiver. So before we get started, I want you to take a moment to think about a worry that you have right now, because I want you to release that worry before you get started. It could be a worry about something at home. It could be a worry about a patient if you are at Alden. It could be a worry from your own caregiving experience. Just take a moment, think about it. You're welcome to put it into chat. You're welcome to write it down. But what's really weighing heavily on your mind right now? And I just want you to think about or write down, I am releasing. I'll tell you why I like to do this exercise in the beginning of a presentation. especially over Zoom, because we're so often distracted and then the worry on top of that. Sometimes we can't really let go and let the experience happen. Believe it or not, I learned that at the best massage I was ever given. I was in Phoenix, and before we started the massage, the woman said, "Here's this basket hanging by the door. I want you to write down on this piece of paper whatever your worry is. And then I want you to open up the door and hang it on the outside." And that literal writing down and putting it out of the room really freed me up to, I'm honest to God, have the best massage I've ever had. So I want you to have the best experience you can. The Caregiving Years concept was developed by Denise Brown in 1997, and she continues to update it all the time. Denise is a force in the caregiving space. She launched a website called caregiving.com in 1996, and then sold it in 2020 to really focus on training and support programs for caregivers. So for, more than, I don't even know how many years now, almost 30 years, Denise has been talking about the caregiving years as a way for caregivers to answer the questions, why me, why now, and what now? But also as professionals, it's really helpful if you understand that caregiving is a journey and that you are going to meet caregivers at different steps on that journey, and that, understanding where they are can help you be the best resource for them. As Ben mentioned, I am a caregiver, cared for my dad until we lost him for congestive heart failure in 2015. I continue to be a caregiver for my mom, who is legally blind with mobility issues and a diabetic. We are at the moment doing everything to keep her in her home. I lost my job due to caregiving issues. And it's not a new story, but that set me on a path to being an entrepreneur and actually founding this company, Advocate for Mom and Dad. I'm a writer. I blog on my website. I've written a book, so I speak on the book. And I also do consulting with other family caregivers because I found Denise's caregiving program. I am a certified caregiving consultant. I am a certified caregiving educator and advocator, and I'm also a certified dementia practitioner as well. I want to give you, just let you know that I will be talking about what we term a carry. Right? And often when people talk about the person you're caring for, you talk about a loved one or a care recipient. But what Denise has realized, and I know to be true working for families, is sometimes we care for family members or members that aren't our family, or maybe family members where our relationships are a little strained and maybe they're not exactly your loved one. So instead of having weird feelings about the term, Carrie kind of calls it for everybody, whether it's a family member, a friend, a neighbor, a stranger, because we do often care for strangers as well. Simply helping somebody get groceries in their car, if they're an older person, is a way of being a caregiver. And so you really are one without even realizing it. Before we actually get into the 6 stages, I think it's really important to understand some universal truths about this journey, and that caregiving is not a location experience. It is an emotional experience. And too often, as professionals, and Ben, you know this, we focus on the task. What are the activities of daily living? What are the instrumental activities of daily living? And we miss the emotional toll that caregiving takes on the caregiver. And in doing that, we also miss the opportunity to connect with people, right? Like you may be working with someone who has cancer or someone who has a heart problem. But if they're at that end of life stage, the emotions that the caregiver is going through is exactly the same. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. If you are a caregiver and you need support, understanding that although somebody's caregiving physical tasks and what they need to do for someone that has a stroke versus someone with dementia versus someone with congestive heart failure, which is what my dad had, the tasks may be different, but the emotions are exactly the same. They're universal, and it doesn't matter whether you are the caregiver for someone who is living at home or someone who is in a community, a facility, or they're in a hospital or a rehab. And understanding the impact of those emotions is so incredibly helpful, both for a caregiver, and as a professional as well. Caregiving years is a concept. I'm not going to tell you that, you're going to be in stage 1 for 3 years or 3 months or whatever. What it really is kind of a flexible guide, and it's very, very fluid. You're going to see when I talk about the stages that I went through the stages as my dad's caregiver. But when I became my mom's caregiver, I revisited some of those stages because what she needed and our relationship was different. So because it's kind of fluid, what we're going to focus on is keywords really there to help you cope with the emotions, okay? We're going to just take each keyword and kind of outline it and bring it forward, and just also recognize that you're going to stumble. You're going to feel like there are failures or things that didn't go well. But, there are steadies for each one of those stumbles. My intention that by the end of this program, you will understand that the caregiving journey, those caregiving years, the emotions you have are normal, right? And we're going to talk about the help you can get to get beyond what you're feeling. There's a lot of feeling of loss in caregiving on so many levels. And how do you get beyond that loss? I'm not going to lie to you. This journey is hard. I am now my mother's caregiver for almost 7 years, and I still struggle with it. Both the losses she's going through in terms of health and mobility, and the loss I have of not having the life I had planned for myself. So we want to help you plan and prepare, and really realize and validate that this is hard, but there's joy in it as well. The idea is to build knowledge and confidence in the different stages to help you find your purpose and your value, and that making mistakes or stumbles are a part of the journey, and that's okay. You learn as you move through. So stage 1, Denise, is called the expectant caregiver, and the key word is that you need to ask. The purpose of this stage is to prepare for caregiving, but also to prepare to take care of yourself. This is like a terrific time to start having those conversations about what is the support network of the person that you're caring for, right? So when my dad died, I had no idea who the plumber was and the electrician was and all that stuff that I needed to keep my mom's home in good repair, right? So I had to spend time doing that. If I had realized I was an expectant caregiver, I would have that conversation with my dad since he did all that work, right? And not have to piece it together. And face it, we're all expectant caregivers. You may or may not be doing the work right now, but if you can start preparing for it, that will make your life so much easier down the road. So we're all expectant caregivers. Discussions about not only the support network your loved one has, everything from, do you have a power of attorney? Do you have a will? Who's your plumber? Who's your electrician? Are you doing all of your bill paying online? What are the websites? What are the phone numbers? What are the passwords, right? All of that stuff, you can gather that in the expectant caregiver stage, helps you tremendously as you move forward into the next stage. And then talking about just care, like what do you want? Do you want to stay at home? Are you open to go to an assisted living? We know you have cancer. What are the things that you do or don't want to do, right? But what we often forget in our preparation to be a caregiver and help the person that we're going to care for is we don't realize how our future is impacted by caregiving. And the more we're informed, the more we ask questions in this stage, the more prepared we are. And when you're prepared, you realize that you have to also prepare to preserve what you need, what's going to keep you healthy and keep you sane. So since the key word is ask, you want to be asking questions of your caree. You want to be asking questions of their healthcare professionals, their primary, their specialty doctors. You want to know if they have a lawyer and a financial planner. You want to be asking questions of any of them to prepare yourself. And then questions of other family members who may be involved in the care itself. You could come from a family of 5 siblings and the expectation is that they are going to help you. You know what? If you can understand what their boundaries are ahead of time, it will save so much grief and sorrow on the end when you feel like that brother isn't stepping up to the plate. If you know that ahead of time, you can plan for it and maybe not feel so hurt when they don't step up to the plate because you know where their boundaries are. You know, we talk so much about understanding what your caree wants at end of life, what kind of care they want in terms of treatment. But I also urge you to find out, how do they want to live their life? Do they want to continue to golf? Do they want to continue to go out to church? Do they want to continue to go out to dinner? Because then you can put the things in place that will help them live their life fully for as long as they can. And it's not always about, they need a ride. Sometimes it's about buying cards that have the easier to see because the cards themselves, the imprint is bigger, right? It's knowing and helping them to live the best life. And you can find all that information out in this first stage with the ask. And I'm here to tell you, my book is all about understanding how caregiving changes relationships and how important conversations are. And the best place to start those conversations and how to start them are right here in this stage. The freshman caregiver is the second stage, and this key word is to find, to experiment, to get your feet wet and see what works both for you and your caree, and to create habits that allow you to continue to enjoy your role. This is where it's really beginning. You're starting to say to yourself, wait a minute, that was an interesting conversation. What's going on there? You start to buy groceries for your loved one while you're doing your own grocery shopping. All of a sudden you decide, I better go to the doctor because Dad's hearing isn't great and we need a second set of ears, right? This is the little spidey sense that you have that things are changing. And this is where you want to basically say, yeah, no, I'm not ready for this. Don't ignore it. Okay, it's beginning. If you ask, you are going to keep yourself from making assumptions about all of the things your caree wants and what you can and cannot do. This second stage, this find, is going to keep you going in action. We really do need to experiment. What we think is the best answer for our loved one may not be. And so we need to figure out what meets their needs and ours. And always, always remember to save something yourself. What we want to form is good habits. You want to find the information. You want to look outside for yourself for resources. You don't want to have to do it all. You want to let go of outcomes, let go of the assumptions that this is going to be the outcome. It may not be what you wanted, so you're back to finding information, right? That's why we say find and experiment. And what you're looking for are services that are going to help you. You're looking for support that comforts you and your caree, and you are finding ways to continue to enjoy your hobbies and interests even as you step into this caregiver role. The third stage is entrenched, right? And this is, the key word here is to receive. And the purpose really is to develop a routine, create a schedule for yourself, and create a schedule for your caree. This is probably, personally, I think, is the hardest stage as a caregiver. It's really intensifying, okay? You're starting to feel like this whole experience is just swallowing you up, your life, your time, what you had intended for yourself. If you remember to keep on asking, that's again going to keep you from making assumptions. If you keep on asking, you will find the things that are going to be helpful to you and to your caree, but you have to be open to receiving them, okay? Because if you receive help, you're going to keep yourself from drowning. And it's really hard to do, but this is when it's the most important to save as much as you can, something for yourself. I will talk, say for anyone in Ben's organization, particularly discharge planners, this is probably where you're meeting the caregiver. You may meet them in the very beginning, but when it's intensifying, it oftentimes means that something has happened. There's been an event. They've gone to the hospital and now they're going to rehab and they need help. Understanding that the caregiver is feeling swallowed up by this can be really, really helpful for you for first, just when they ask 1,000,001 questions. Be patient with them. They're trying to find the answers, that they're feeling like this whole thing, they're not even sure they can do it anymore, okay? And understand that they're panicked, okay? They do not understand insurance and Medicaid rules that govern much of what you do. And so there's going to probably need to be education on that, and to just connect with them, because discharge planning happens the moment you enter a facility. And most caregivers don't understand that. So initiating conversation with them right off the bat and keeping them in the loop will help keep the panic at bay. I talk to so many clients who are like, oh my God, the rehab just called. They're releasing mom in 3 days. What do I do now? Right? And that just intensifies the panic. So understanding where they are emotionally, helping them to find resources, opening that lines of communication from the moment that their caree comes into your facility really will be incredibly helpful and make your job smoother, because let's face it, nothing is worse than all of a sudden a family member going, what do you mean? They're leaving. What do you mean, right? So understanding where the panic comes from, okay? In this insurance, what we really try and help people understand is that take the help and support where you can get it, and that you need breaks from caregiving, right? Take the help when you can. You need breaks. Find that support and accept where you are, right? This is probably the stage where we fight acceptance as caregivers the most, because it is so intense and it so often happens. You get that spidey sense in the second stage, but we tend to deny it because we know our world is going to change. So accepting that this is your new world is really, really hard. But when you receive help and you receive the support and you continue to ask and find answers, you can get to acceptance. Because when you receive help and support, you do move into into acceptance. And that, let me tell you, it's almost, for me, it was almost like the grief stages. Like in this stage, there was denial and there was anger, and then there was acceptance. And that kind of going through those stages, I find happened to me in the entrenched stage. And I go back to that. When something happens with mom with a new diagnosis and something changes, or, my mother this past summer had both 2 wounds in the middle of the pandemic and such a severe eye infection that she really is now legally blind, right? So all of those things that happened, I had to go back and ask questions and find the resources. And so you find yourself, even in this stage, sometimes moving backwards, which is why you always want to bring the ask and the find forward. It's hard. I'm not going to tell you it is not hard, but the help is out there when you're open to it. And when you're open to it, you can move into acceptance. And without that acceptance, you fight it. You get cranky with your caree, you get cranky with the people that are trying to help you. At some point, I said, this is where I am. This is the life stage I'm in. Now, how do I continue to hold on for something for myself because I need it for my own mental sanity? I really, really do. The second, or I'm sorry, the fourth stage is the pragmatic caregiver. And I will tell you, that's where I am now, right? And the key word as a pragmatic caregiver is welcome. And the purpose is to gain a better understanding of yourself and your caree. And I will tell you that it was in this stage as a pragmatic caregiver that I wrote my book, because I gained a better understanding of myself and my caree. Okay. So here's the thing. In the pragmatic caregiving stage, for the most part, you've adjusted. You've gone through so much, you're not as thrown by a crisis. It's still intense, but you don't blink an eye. So for me, when mom had that first wound, it was like, okay, you're a diabetic. We need to find a wound doctor. Let's call your primary and get some recommendations. It was making sure her live-in caregiver understood what was going to happen, and the nurse in the care agency. And it was figuring out, were we going to do home care or were we going to go see the wound doctor? This was in the very beginning of the pandemic. And so we went to the wound doctor. And I will tell you, when we went into the hospital, they're like, have you been out of the country, in the last whatever? We were like, no, and they let us in. By the time we were released with the wound doctor, we were masked, we were getting our temperature taken, and the questions were very, very different, okay? But we'd adjusted. I wasn't thrown by the crisis, okay? Asking, again, will keep you from assumptions. I had to ask the doctor, how, can we continue to come here? What do we need to do? I had to find a place we could go to. And being able to receive it meant that I wasn't going to drown. I knew what was coming. In this stage, it's so interesting to me. In this stage, part of my being less stressed was because I had come to the acceptance that I was a caregiver and this was my life. And I actually was finding meaning and purpose in the experience. So that's the gift of being a pragmatic caregiver. You really do find meaning and purpose. And once you welcome it and no longer fight it, you can see the purpose, okay? Taking those words forward, I had to ask, I had to find the right resources and receive the information and the help that I was asking for and not fight it. I think it's really interesting because the first 2 stages are about you and the middle stages are about your caree. What are you doing for them? And you really can, in this stage, find renewed joy in your relationship for the person that you're caring for. I think one of the things that was so interesting for me in this stage is my mom and I had struggled growing up. We really had. And that was part of my dilemma in the entrenched stage and even in the beginning. Oh my gosh, we fought so much growing up. What's going to happen now? Is this going to ruin our relationship? But as I moved to acceptance, we really became a team, and there's great joy in our relationship now. It also welcomed the forgiveness, both from my mom and from myself. And we found ways to share activities. We got back to being mother-daughter in this pragmatic stage through shared activities, and not just caregiver, so focused on the tasks of caregiving. So the fifth stage is the transitioning caregiver. And your key word here is allow. And this is to walk with your caree during his last months and weeks. No one knows when you're going to become a transition caregiver. It can happen very quickly, or it can, I'm 7 years into this and my mom is really doing well. She will be 90 in February 1st, and there's longevity on her side. So I have no idea how long my journey with her will go on. But this stage, you're really in a state of flux. When my dad was in this stage, the only thing I could say to my mom and my brother was, we're on borrowed time. And they'd say, well, what does that mean? And I'd say, I don't know. I can't tell you when things will happen, but I will tell you we're on borrowed time. And as a caregiver, for me, what I recognized was my father was just getting really tired. Really tired. He was tired not feeling well. He was tired of going back and forth to the doctors. He was tired of them having to always adjust his medication for the Lasix because he was holding on to fluid. He was just really, really tired. The purpose in this, when I talk about to walk with your caree, is to be with them. We have spent however much time, whether it's a year or 2 months or 7 years as caregivers, incredibly task focused, right? Are the meds there? Have we paid the copay? Do I have to fight with the insurance company? All of those tasks, including are my mom's quarterly taxes paid? She needs a new dishwasher. I have to go look for one. All of the tasks, which are not just always hands-on. And it's hard to break away from that and let go. And because so often we feel like, well, if I do this, maybe they'll feel better. Well, if I do this, we can give them more time. Dad may have more time. The problem is the solution is to really be with your loved one, with your caree, and recognize when they start to transition, and then let go of some of the tasks. Here's the other challenge with that. If you're the caregiver and you have siblings, it may be harder for them to go through this transitioning stage. And you see that it's the ending, but it's also the beginning. If we ask what our loved one, what our caree wants, we don't assume. And maybe the sibling that is having the most difficulty needs to be part of that asking. What do you want? Then we can find what will keep in action. There's a lot to be said for palliative care and having a team around you that can give your caree what they want and need and keep you from doing all the to-dos. You can feel sorrow and feel like you're drowning, so we need to recognize that and receive what help we can. Your purpose now is maybe changing. Maybe it's not so much the doing, but it's being with your loved one. And in allowing that, the reality of what's going on, it helps you to cope, right? When we allow the reality of what is going on to guide us, we feel less judgmental towards things, towards ourselves, what we should or could be doing, and towards our caree if they're ready to just transition. You know, it's hard to let go and transition from doing to being, but that really is the purpose of this stage. You want to allow the natural cycle of life. You want to allow the ability to both mourn and grieve starting now. You want to allow remembrances of the time. And this is when you can start to reflect on your experience. And the reflections that you start now will help you in that last and final stage. And that last and final stage is the Godspeed Caregiver. And the key word here is to treasure. You know, to implement and share your lessons you learn from your role as a caregiver. This was, I have to tell you, I have not, in some ways I've gone through this stage, and some ways I have not. And I'll talk about that more because we lost my dad, right? I helped him transition. And that Godspeed Caregiver stage was really in tandem with me with beginning stages, because I immediately moved into being my mother's caregiver. I took over that role with my dad. And so I still needed to reflect on what I learned. But at that point, I did not have the question that caregivers have in this stage, which is, who am I? If I'm not a caregiver, who am I? And that's probably the hardest part. And I will tell you, if you have been a caregiver and lost your caree, and you felt like you were floundering for 2 years or more, that is not unusual. That is the journey of the Godspeed Caregiver. You know, we really have given up a lot as a caregiver. Sometimes we've given up a career. We've had to put aside friends. Maybe family has been there or not been there. So much has changed during this experience that we need time to breathe and figure out who we are and what our purpose is. You have to be ready to start what's next. And if you ask yourself and ask other people, you can keep from assuming. You can find what it is that gives you purpose and makes you feel whole again. You can receive what you need. You can welcome this new purpose, and you can allow yourself to cope and to move forward. The truth of the matter is, treasuring those years will bring you blessings, because when you can start to treasure those years, you can figure out what your dreams are. You can build on the challenges that led to new skills. You can create opportunities to share the lessons you've learned, you know, and then you just have your memories of your caree. If you're not at this stage yet, then I would urge you, document your experience, because when you get to this Godspeed, going back and looking that will help you, will help you so much. And it'll help you to limit the self-pity, receive the support you need, and go back to a life. It will be different. It will be changed, because caregiving changes you. You know you're going to be okay when you can redefine hope, when you can remain realistic, and do what you can to let go and let others do. So here's the thing that I think is so interesting. This is what I've come to know. I treasured that transition time with my dad. We had many wonderful conversations, some very, very practical about here's the list of, where the money is and with passwords, and some about, we reminisced about being a family and vacations, but we also talked about what was important to him. what he wanted. Okay. Because because I became my mom's caregiver immediately, right? I did not have the full Godspeed transition, but I lost my job right after my dad died. And so my Godspeed transition became deciding not to go back into corporate as a consultant doing end user training, but to create my own business, this business I call Advocate for Mom and Dad. And what I think is so interesting about that, my mother is the one who gave me the push to do that. I was home for about 3 months getting my mom settled, and it was those 3 months that caused me to lose my job, which I'm grateful that I had them. I'm even grateful that I lost my job, because she said to me one time, you have learned so much. You need to share it. And that got me started on starting my own business. I said earlier, right now I'm in the pragmatic stage with my mom, but in each change of her status, I go back to ask and find. She wound up having 2 wounds during the pandemic. And I knew what I needed to do in terms of we needed to have somebody come in. We needed somebody clean the wound. We knew what we needed to do for that wound. But I knew enough that I did not want to bring her to the hospital. So my ask of her primary care was not, can you give me the names of wound people in the area? It was, give me the names of healthcare companies like visiting nurses that can come into the home, because I will not bring her out of the house. It was farther along the pandemic. It was much scarier, right? The emotions are the most difficult. I still struggle with them. I can get angry and resentful, but by the same token, my mom and I can have such wonderful conversations that there's great joy in it. The thing that surprised me the most was caregiving changes relationships. Not just the relationship between you and your caree, but the relationships with everyone in your life. I have had to put aside friendships for the time being because they are not and have never been a caregiver. And because they don't understand what I'm doing and they don't understand the emotions, they are not helpful to me. I'm not saying I won't pick up the friendship again later, but for my own sanity and mental health, I had to put them aside, and I am okay with that. The other thing that I realized is that caregiving can change relationships within the family, particularly between siblings. I am very lucky in that my brother and I agree 100% on what we want for mom and we agree with what she wants. It was my sister-in-law who I struggled with. And so I had to set a boundary with her. It didn't change our relationship, but I had to understand and set a boundary with her. Now, my brother and sister-in-law live 12 hours away. They are not physically able to help me. And we're both okay with that because they do it in other ways. They do it financially. So I want you to think about 2 terms. One is called family of origin. The other is called family of choice. Now, we're lucky. Mom's Italian. I'm Italian and Irish. My family of origin extends to a large group of aunts and uncles and cousins. And so mom and I get help from them. I was caring for mom this past weekend. I'm her caregiver every other weekend for 4 days and every doctor's visit and yada, 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 and taking care of her 64-year-old home as well. But I wanted to go to a baptism for the grandchild of a best friend. And my cousin came and stayed with my mom so I could go. That was such a blessing. That's part of my family of origin, but it extends past siblings. My family of choice are my friends. And they will also, if they say, hey, do you want to go to dinner? I'll say, it's a mom weekend, but mom and I'll make dinner. Come for a visit. and they will. They'll come to my mother's house. And in that help from my family of choice, I get to see them, my mother gets to see them and get a social time. So I want you to remember that for many reasons, your family of origin may not be able to help, but there is a family of choices around you, and that family of choice extends to professional facilities and organizations like Ben's, right? There is respite care. If you really need a week, you can talk to a facility about respite care. So understand that there's a lot of help out there. It may not be the traditional, and you know what? That's okay. I will say that if you would like to gain additional insights into your experience, I am happy to talk to anyone for a 30-minute session. It's free. We can create a plan for your worries. You can tell me what your stressors are, and I can help you either create a family emergency plan or worries, or even if you're really struggling with some family dynamics and effective communication, I would be happy to help you with that as well. The truth is, you're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. Thank you, Christopher Robin. Before I end, I want you to think about either where you are in your caregiving journey and the key words: ask, find, allow, receive. What are you going to embrace coming out of this time we've spent together? What are you going to embrace? You might have found something that'll help to adjust the worry that you wrote down and set aside. You might embrace something that you never thought about before. But I hope that there's something tangible that you are going to embrace and put into place based on our discussion today. I would love for you to contact me. I'll leave this up for just a moment. This is my email. This is my phone number. If you're interested to know more about my book, you can go out and take a look on Amazon. It really is about how caregiving changes relationships and how you can either mend or strengthen through effective communication. That means setting boundaries, asking for and saying yes to help, acknowledging the emotions and putting the work in to get to the other side. All those things that if you are a caregiver, you're going to go, yeah. Oh, yeah, I get it. And there's lots of family stories. My mom, God love her, allowed me to share family stories. I also, and the book actually came out of my blog, the 5 most commented on blogs. And so you can also reach me at www.advocateformomandad.com. Let me stop sharing and turn my video on again and say thank you so much for your time and attention. And any questions or comments from anyone? Anything you want me to expand on? Pete, anything in chat?
No, you had a nice, wonderful thank you from Paul Strandquist here, and who says, well, Paul, you could tell her yourself if you like, but my hero, you are my hero along with all caregivers. And Beth, who had to part out a little bit early, a couple of folks did, said, thank you so much, Deborah. So informative. I am sorry I have to leave a little bit early. I will say this was very, very interesting for me because I've not been in a caregiver role myself. My wife's grandmother did live with my wife's parents for a short period of time. Maybe about three or 4 years. She had been in independent living in Adelaide in Wheeling, Illinois. And then she moved into my in-laws' home when she was, I want to say maybe 93. And then when she was 90, I think it was 96 or 97, moved back to Adelaide in just a little bit more attention area, but I mean, she lived there the rest of her time until she was 109, and she yeah,
Oh, wow.
she did pass last year, but not due to COVID. She passed due to 109. It's just a long time. And there, it was interesting when she lived with them in their home. She was had very much an independent area to be to live as much independently or as part of the family as she wanted to there, which I think that probably worked out fairly well because she was a very independent person. But right now we're at the point where my wife and I are being mindful of her parents, even though I mean, there's my father-in-law has been through some health issues over the course of his life, but right now he's super good, fine, dandy. He's 79 now. Mother-in-law is in her earlier 70s. And just, we've been talking about what do we do, because she's the oldest and she has all brothers, and one of her brothers has a household of 4 boys who range between the ages of 2 and 13, and then the 2 others are very much bachelor fellows, and we kind of have a feeling that when the time comes, it's probably going to fall to us. And so we're just kind of being mindful and watching, and how that might pan out. It's interesting when you start having these conversations, because it's not something you really think about as adults and as you're growing up. And I mean, we just became empty nesters ourselves. Well, I mean, we were empty nesters 4 years ago when our youngest went to college, but now she's in grad school, and we're super duper empty nesters because we know, barring some unforeseen circumstance, none of the kids are coming back. So but never say never. You never know. So it's a little strange when you start thinking about, okay, well, if we're making plans to move, do we have to think about her parents? And will we have to be mindful of accommodations that maybe her dad will need or her mom will need, or will they even want to move in with us? Are they going to want to stay where they are? They have a very, very nice home that I think would be like pulling strong white teeth to get Jim, my father-in-law, to move out of. It's and like you, their family's all Italian, and my family was all Irish, English, Welsh. But he's very much the king of his castle. So,
Well, 100%. And you're so wise. You're in the expectant caregiver stage. You're so wise to be thinking about that. And I think so often we're reluctant to start the conversations, but a conversation, doesn't have to be difficult. It could be more, like, hey, mom and dad, we're empty nesters. We're thinking about what we're going to do in the future. What do you want to do? Do you want to stay in the home? And then what would we need to do to keep you here? The big thing is the bathroom and sleeping arrangements upstairs, starting to understand what they want. Not only so you can plan for yourself, but you can start to look at what are the resources we might need. Yeah, you're definitely there.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've been. I mean, because we were thinking about, oh, hey, well, when it comes time, we're just gonna get an RV, and my wife swears she'll be down to 1 dog by that time. and we'll drive around and have good times because our kids, we are pretty sure, are going to be spread across the country. But then we start thinking about her parents, like, oh, maybe we can't do that. Maybe that's not going to be an option. And my parents, my dad has since passed, but my mom is 75. She'll be 76 next year. But she lives very near my brother, who's a surgeon. My sister's a BSN. If she needs or would get to a point where she wants to not be alone, she very much loves her little cottage in Chillicothe, Missouri, where she's at. But if she gets to a point, then she's got super simple options with healthcare professionals in the family that are right there. And while she'd be welcome in our home, she's already made it clear that, well, you're not a doctor, and you're not a nurse, and you have a wonderful voice, and you're great on the radio, and hooray for you at the chamber, but maybe not so much. So.
Hey, you might find yourself being the financial caregiver for her while your sister and brother-in-law are the medical. But it all remains to be seen. But having those conversations, asking those questions, this is the time to be doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and now I'm hogging all your follow-up question or comment time. Anybody else have any thoughts, comments, things you'd like to share?
Pretty much. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Oh, Paul, thank you. Are you on this journey currently?
I'm actually a peer supporter now for caregivers. I took care of my wife for 8 years with her illness, but now I've never had any training or to do any of this, but you just do it, you figure it out. And people are in that journey with the illness that my wife had, they are free to call me to chat or things like that. So that I'm a peer supporter now.
Yeah. It's hard, but there is joy in it, and a feeling of satisfaction. There really is. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate your comment.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Deb, for the presentation and for being available this afternoon or this morning. It was very informative. I always, you mentioned embracing the family of choice that you brought into it this morning. And my grandfather came down with dementia about 4 or 5 years ago, and my grandmother used some family members to help. They lived a few hours away, so it was a little more difficult for us. But she eventually had a friend of hers that would help come over and do some things. My family wasn't too crazy about it because it was a stranger. They didn't know, she's your friend, but how much can we trust her? And this was to help her, through the end of my grandfather's helped her. And eventually did things for her that we couldn't do from our spot now. So you do find those people that can just be a huge blessing for you. It comes in some unexpected forms and fashions sometimes.
Yes, absolutely, Ben. They do, and you have to be open to them. Yeah, you do. Yeah.
You not necessarily being the primary support at times when you really are. It can be a tough relinquishment there, but it's something we've got to do sometimes.
Yeah, I think sometimes at caregivers, we're our own worst enemies. That's why I really do talk about you have to ask for and say yes to help. You really do. And if that means relinquishing control, so be it, for your own mental and physical health.
Yep.
One quick note on my end. If anyone in here this morning was looking to get a professional continuing education credit, I am going to put a link into the chat. And Pete, I might have you send this out in an email to the participants if you've got it today. Just a link to, obviously tell them what you but then also they'll give us some information so we can get you that.
Great, thanks.
I know that a lot of folks, I even saw Tendai, who before she thanked for the presentation, you know, she's in the expecting stage, good to listen in, so they learned something too today. So it was great, Deb. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, happy to do it. Thank you for inviting me. Anytime, I'll come back anytime.
Great. Well, thank you very, very much. And I'm going to go ahead and save the chat here, and then we can send that link out to everybody. And then I'm also going to go ahead and, if we don't have any more comments from Mr. Skoronsky or Jerry Settles here, I will go ahead and I'm going to stop recording now.